From an early age, we often experience a collapse of our foundations. In an effort to find and gauge who we are in the adolescent stage of life, many egos are shattered, and reliances are transformed from one view to the next. A child begins life reliant on their parents for nearly every aspect of survival: food, shelter, love, support, and companionship. But most of all for the examples which the children must follow. Intuitively, we perceive the behavior of others and emulate their characteristics before blending various modes of being we find into a cohesive identity that defines self. It is vitally important then that the faith that a child develops in their parent is fostered with care through a firm yet graceful hand. Maintaining vigilance when evenly applying a consistent character for the child to view lets trust, and more importantly, faith, be rooted in the mind. Many in this day and age find a lack of faith in even the slightest of things due to the failure of this attachment. Neglect presented at a seemingly incidental time period from the parent's perspective may have vital consequences from the child's angle. What is key is to maintain this trust without excessive coddling, and being able to distinguish and know one's child. As an example, when your child acts out, is it a cry for attention? Then it would be best to let the temper tantrum run its course without capitulating to any demands once you firmly plant the idea that such tactics will get them nowhere. An alternative explanation for acting out could be that the child is desperately battling with an inner identity crisis that would certainly do with a little indirect insinuation towards the solution that is suited to their specific temperament. A quote from Carl Jung states, "Children are educated by what the grown-up is, and not by his talk." Another quote from Otto von Bismarck is, "Only a fool learns from his own mistakes. The wise man learns from the mistakes of others." Branching off this idea, it is imperative to allow gradual exposure to the failures of others for your child to witness, and contrast this to the successes you and healthy individuals bring to the table. This will not only improve your image in the eyes of the child, but they will instinctually learn from others' mistakes rather than their own in the manner that you have. Effectiveness is the universal equalizer in terms of respect. Those who do well are received well. Meeting any parent, labeled good or bad, each will tell you the same thing, and that there is no singular right way to raise a child. This is of course due to the immutable differences in every soul that walks this earth, their decisions and experiences that shape this baseline to develop into a million different ways. Therefore, what determines the likelihood of success for this most important endeavor is establishing two things. 1, knowing your child, and 2, putting the best interests of the child before both your desires and theirs. Neither can be achieved without an intermingling with the other. To know a child, you have to know how they will react, what they love, what they hate, the physical quirks they exhibit on their faces in reaction to good news and bad, their tolerance for socialization, and their personalities. Most of the development and encouragement of their dreams, when shown how to flourish in deep and healthy ways, can be both good for them and fall in line with their intrinsic desires. For example, a love of art can be further exemplified with establishing a healthy appreciation for the human figure. Preventing access to porn can prevent the debasement of a healthy appreciation for the nude body, allowing the natural allure to grow with time and experience as they age. We may touch upon further aspects of raising children, but for now the impact of trust and therefore faith is the key focus. In hearing the words, "Your parents will always love you," a key synapse is struck in the little developing mind to associate comfort and respite within the hearts of these worthwhile confidants. This phrase must be immutable and unassailable. By hearing these words, the child will branch out and base every relationship in their life as a comparison to this baseline. Good manifestations will be seen as attractive, bad as something to avoid, And through this branching, they will come to know themselves, often growing in ways you might find unimaginable during the darkest hours of your time together. Followed by this statement, it is perhaps even more important to define what love is, how it is expressed, and why. Though spoiling your child may come naturally from a place of doting affection, it will do them more harm in the long run than good. A balance of sternness and tenderness must be struck, represented most generally by the father and mother respectively, though never in bidirectional totality, which may give an unrealistic phobia or saintly characteristic upon one parent or the other. The burden is equal in magnitude, yet different in application. By this methodology, the proper gender roles assigned to man and woman by our hormonal nature will be firmly ingrained in an unwavering fashion, not only to allow a healthy symbiotic family relationship, but for the identification of desirable traits in future partners based on honorable aspects exemplified through a son's mother or a daughter's father. These basic principles will provide a solid framework not only as a guide for raising children, but instilling them with the most important trait for any human being to have, faith. To live a purposeful life, one must have purpose. This may sound silly by itself, but the sick usurpation of healthy mentalities within the modern world rejects the notion of faith and hope. Our society deceives us with the notion of fragility. The argument they make is that since things are ephemeral, as relationships in life can often be, so too should we lower our expectations both for others and for ourselves. It is inevitable, so we might as well give in to pettiness by expressing it ourselves. You may be able to see how this corrupt ideology is directly antithetical to the concept of faith and its importance. When we witness pettiness, betrayal, abandonment, and resignation, we return thrice in kind with exceptional calmness, loyalty, courage, nobility, and refusal to give in to the darkness. In our dichotomy, you can either be life-affirming or life-denying. Instead of following the corruptive malaise that is ever pervasive in our society, one should stab the sword of their convictions into the darkness to illuminate the surroundings, providing clarity for those who spawn contemptible traits in their despair. Faith at its core is the belief that the good will always outshine the bad. If we live as God intended, then our reward is doubled for being steadfast in virtue and resisting the temptation of degradation. One cannot find faith through selfish means. Morality cannot be subjective. It cannot be born solely from the mind of man, for if it was, then hormones and whims of power would shift and shape whatever our existence would claim to be, rather than what it simply is. History has proven time and time again that the cooperation of just peoples will always overcome the maliciousness of selfish, subjective morality that in and of itself can never achieve consensus by its very definition. In following universal principles, we do not permit the value of one life to be above that of another, unless determined by God to be so. In other words, only the karmic forces of existence itself can truly judge the deeds of man. Another quote by Wilhelm II. I see myself as an instrument of the Almighty and go on my way regardless of transient opinions and views. Allow me to make it quite clear that belief and conviction in matters seemingly beyond the scope of one's individual life constitutes a major portion of faith. Extenuating your bloodline, passing on both the achievements and failures to the next of kin, is the purest mark you can place on existence, this being the material immortality offered us by the very form we inhabit. Faith, at its deepest and primal root, is a connection to existence. How your life is lived in accordance with the omnipresent energy surrounding and permeating your own existence is how one applies faith. This phenomena transcends denomination, whether it be Christian, pagan, Buddhist, Hindu, or otherwise. These labels merely represent the form and expression of individual peoples and the prophets they followed in order to best emulate a pure existence. This perennial purity is the only true path to fulfillment and enlightenment. Those with a soul are predisposed with God's ingrained sense of morality that is collective across cultures and time periods, never changing, yet never quite understood perfectly in its entirety. Ethics and rules we follow to reach this peak are all-in-one methods for possessing a stronger connection to this being that encompasses all life. To understand the imperfection within these systems and within the self is to come to understand the first lesson of existence. We will touch more upon how these roots overlap and often even link back to a singular source predating each iteration in another video, and perhaps in another series. For now, it would suffice to understand that each ethnic European is bound to a collective spirit, and shirking your brother or sister for practicing a different denomination than yourself not only is a dereliction of the faith one might ascribe to, but it is also predicated on shaky grounds which serve to harm both the self and the very concept of our frith as a whole. In returning to the concept of how karma is the only true entity that is truly capable of judging a man, we will explore in the upcoming videos how this thought was used in chaotic and destructive ways, and also how it was used properly to manifest a higher collective spirit, inspiring people to this very day. Truth is eternal, whereas deception and chaos is ever-changing. All it takes for prosperity to triumph is for truth to prevail amidst chaos. This comes effortlessly from freely attributing what is true without the spurious effort to deceive or obfuscate.